Thank you very much to all the speakers. Very, very rich conversation, and I have the impossible task of saying something to add on to what the last 4 or 5 hours have brought to our attention. But certainly very dense, but very fruitful also for us that we are listening to this kind of debates at the national level with a great deal of interest. Let me try to say just 2 or 3 things that I think it's important to recognize. Not necessarily in priority order, but a couple of things that I wish to convey as our final remarks. My colleagues have already covered most of the topics that we discussed, so you will have the presentations, and if you need additional background materials or the full compilation of studies that have been quoted, please let us know. One connecting point to the colleague representing the legal department at the Ministry of Economy and Industry, I believe. This was a quite interesting presentation. I really enjoyed that particular analysis, particularly on the issue of telework and remote work. As most of the countries, particularly the advanced economies, Israel is looking at specific legislation to do that. You are not the first and you won't be the last. And I think you're doing the right thing in looking at the issues that you have described. Some of the things they have their own complexities, and we see a number of countries around the world that they are really getting into these national debates. If it's of any use for you at the ministry or other counterparts in Israel to touch base with us, we have a group of dedicated colleagues who are looking at legislation or draft legislation rather in terms of telework, remote work. Some countries, they have already adopted the fully fledged legislation. The last one I've seen is Russia adopting a national law on telework. It doesn't mean that it's good for Israel, but certainly we have a few reference points that can be used and adapted to the national circumstances. So this is on draft legislation on telework and remote work. The office stands. I will certainly get in touch with the colleagues at the IIRRA to see whether there is any follow-up on that. More on the specifics, or say the final synthesis of this conversation, which I said was very rich. But I was noting 2 or 3 points that I believe are of essence. Number one, I think a lot of speakers, they gave special attention to the specific needs of young workers and women. And this is not lip service. I think this particular industry, this particular sector is extremely connected to these 2 key constituencies and with their own dynamics and so on. So whether it's legally, whether it's normative, whether it's more on the economic analysis, as one of my colleagues brought to your attention, I would encourage you to continue to engage with these 2 groups, to look at their special needs, to try to accommodate as much as possible in terms of the way to engage them and make an inclusive labor market for these 2 particular categories. I've enjoyed the presentation on the Orthodox women, which brought to my attention some aspects of that society or that community that I was aware, but obviously there is always something to learn. So second message is, again, and I think it surfaced very clearly from this conversation that we had today, is the centrality of social dialogue. I think both the representative of the Eastern Route, the representative of the employers, they call for a framework, they call for a way of engagement, for a platform, if I can use the word, really to engage on a bilateral basis, on a trilateral basis. So there is a lot of hunger for social dialogue mechanisms, and Costa, sorry, provided you with a few examples. Again, the ILO is the international house of social dialogue, if you like. If you want to know more about tools, examples, models that we have in this particular sector or in broader sectors, or other social dialogue tools that can be adapted to this, please do not hesitate to get in touch. Another message is that, again, there is demand, there is appetite for policy and regulatory coherence, particularly at the international level. The key question here is the ILO working somehow on a new form of international labor standards for the platform economy and the gig economy. Obviously, they're being called for that. We haven't reached really as an organization a clear determination whether this can be an issue for standard setting in the ILO, but certainly is an area that we are more and more engaged. The kind of global work that Uma has presented to you was an enormous piece of research that we have done. So we have done quite a bit of analysis on the various issues, on the various topics. And here, I really encourage you to refer to one of the last slides that Uma brought to your attention, where certainly she summarized in a very eloquent way the issues that they are on the table when you look at regulatory, when you look at the employment dimension, when you look at social protection dimensions, when you look at social dialogue dimensions. It's all there. I mean, the employment status, the right to collective, to bargain collectively, the issue of adequate social security benefits, the way countries, they are looking at dispute resolution mechanism, sentences or judgments from countries, from the UK to Italy, and other have been brought to your attention today. The issue of a fair termination process when there is such a scenario is also central. Payments, wage protection, fair payments, working time standards, again, another dimension, incredibly important. Non-discrimination, we know that in some cases, particularly when we are looking at certain migrant workers doing a particular platform work, it can be an issue. Occupational safety and health, the very, very contemporary issue of transparency and accountability in algorithms and ratings, extremely, extremely important. There are various working groups, including the ILO, looking at algorithm discrimination and so on. Very topical, the access to local jurisdictions. I think a couple of the last speakers, they have referred to that, particularly core to the work of the ILO. And Costa's provided you a couple of examples of existing standards that they are looking at these issues and they can be applied to the sector. Data protection, privacy issues, again, the portability of the worker data and ratings. When you move from one platform to the other, you have an history of your engagement with the previous platform. This remains contentious whether the data generated during your employment relationship is portable or not and remains part of your competence set. And also from the point of view of enterprises, to create an enabling environment for sustainable enterprises to perform platform work. I know is a lot on your plate if you want to take this discussion further, but I really enjoyed this conversation. I was taking detailed notes and it was certainly very enriching for us. And on behalf of my colleagues and here from Geneva, I wish you all the best for the continuation of your work. And thanks again for connecting and engaging with the ILO on this occasion. And thanks again for your invitation to visit Tel Aviv or any other parts of Israel next year when we hope we will be all around the same table in person. Thank you very much indeed again.